Hi guys, it's Trev, idiot on a motorbike, and this is day 8 and 9, so Saturday and Sunday, of our epic Highway to Heaven Grand Tour of Switzerland. Now today would see us travel from Buhl to Rotterdam Europoort, sail overnight, and then ride back to Ferrybridge services. As we all sat for breakfast, I was asked what I had planned for next year. Now originally I was not going to say anything at this point, but due to the conversation last night at dinner about how much they had enjoyed the trip, how it was the best trip they had been on, etc., I decided to spill the beans. I had got in the pipeline my Giro de Dolomite tour. Now the dates needed to be confirmed with my wife first, then I'd secure hotels, at which point anyone who wanted to come could come. But this time they needed to book their own ferry. I did not want those issues again, far easier for everyone to do it themselves. Instantly Dave and Ellen were, "We want to come," and a few of the others were also very interested. So once I could clarify dates, I said I'd let them all know. Then all I got was, it's going to be a tough act to follow, but I knew what the next tour entailed, and I'm pretty sure it's up there with this tour. After breakfast, I quickly got a photo with the old lady of the establishment, who was dressed in her traditional German clothing for this area, thanked her for their hospitality and checked out, meeting everyone with the bikes fully laden up and ready for the off. We set off down the hill and into Buhl, then onto the main road for a fuel stop. Our first leg was a 2-hour stint covering 120 miles, with the vast majority on the motorway. This part was boring, to be honest. We made it to the Aral petrol station, which had an eatery built onto it, so after filling the bikes we also had a coffee and some snack, courtesy of the hotel we had just left. Our journey continued north on the motorway. I was locked on cruise control at a constant 75 miles per hour, with everyone else behind, occasionally having to play catch up. We tried to always stay in formation, a bit like a zigzag line, keeping 3 seconds between the bike and yourself, whilst having a bike to your side, probably 1.5 seconds split. This is generally how a group of Harleys rides. Occasionally cars would try to get between us, and if a lapse in concentration from someone came, which would allow that gap to be created, they'd slip in. But as at one point a car was actually forcing its way in, making Dave swerve to avoid being hit. Occasionally we came into congestion, and just like God who parted the waves for the Israelites, I split the traffic, allowing us to ride steadily through and onwards. After a further 2 petrol stops, including a comfort break, we had made it to Rotterdam. I was first and passed through customs. I went round the bend so I could no longer see what was happening at the border check. I pulled over and waited, but no one was following for what seemed like an eternity. After about 10 minutes, I decided to turn round and go back to sea, but a port worker stopped me, saying I now had to proceed. I explained my situation and he went and checked. Then all of a sudden, they all came round. They had been processed together. I jumped back on my bike and set off again, with them all in tow, and finally we pulled up onto the ferry. We all went off to our respective cabins with the intention of meeting back up in the bar on the top deck. As soon as I connected to the free Wi-Fi, my phone was pinging, my wife telling me to call her ASAP. I called via WhatsApp and she told me she was heading to the vets. Max had taken a really bad turn for the worst and now had developed pneumonia. He was really struggling to breathe and there was nothing they could do for him now, and the only humane thing was he needed to be put to sleep. Obviously she was in tears and was driving there. When she got there she rang me back and I could see how poorly Max was via video call. We were both really upset, and after about 10 minutes we had to end the call while the deed was done. After she'd paid the huge vet bill, and I mean huge, for his treatment and stay in hospital, and was now sat back in the car, she rang me back up. It was quite an emotional call, to be honest, but once she had composed herself, she headed back to our daughter's house and picked up our foster kids before returning home. As you can guess, they were all very upset too. After tea we made our way back to the bar on the top deck. Everyone was gathered there and we all had a drink in hand. Graham had quietened everyone down and gave a little speech about how good the trip had been, the organisation which had been put into it, etc., how everyone was grateful, and then presented me with an envelope. I was reluctant to take it. I had not organised it for monetary reward. It was nice that they had thought about it and had a collection. I kind of refused it, but Graham informed me either I took it or he would transfer it to my bank. It was a thank you for what I'd done for everyone and would make a nice treat for me and Janice to have a nice meal out together, since she had remained at home looking after the kids. The next morning I had arranged to have breakfast with Dave and Helen. I think they were concerned for me and it did help having someone to meet up with. Then it was time to get our bags packed and we all met in the lounge, waited to be called to our bikes. Then the call came and we headed down. We loaded our belongings onto the bikes and sat in our full riding gear, waiting to be set on our way. They moved the lorries off from the lower decks as normal, then the cars off from our deck, which would have blocked our route off the ferry. But the bike rider from at the front of one of the lines was not there. Not that it made a difference, but there was an issue with the port and the loading, disembarking was being done a bit differently to normal, but this was still no excuse for what happened. A Filipino port worker was gestating for us to move and disembark as our route was now clear, when a Dutchman stopped him and continued to move the cars from all the decks above. Never in all my years of using North Sea ferries, or any ferry for that matter, have we been held till the end, to be the last off. Normally we are one of the first off, as it can get quite hot sat in your riding gear. After about 35 minutes of waiting, I remembered that my bike was still in kilometres, so I needed to change it back to miles per hour. My instinct was to start the bike, and since I rarely changed its settings, I needed to work out how to do it again. Now, bearing in mind, we have cars moving past us, all with engines running and emitting fumes. I was trying to sort out my miles per hour correction. The previously mentioned Dutchman came over shouting, "Turn your fucking engine off! I've not said you can start it yet." I stayed really calm considering my emotional and mental state at the moment. I explained what I was trying to do, but his response was not very polite, let's put it that way. He said I had been blanking him when he was shouting at me, to which I stated that I had earplugs in and that I had not seen him until he was alongside me. I explained that I was looking at my handlebar controls and then back to the computer screen, but he kept claiming I had ignored him. I flicked my engine kill switch to off, but continued with the ignition turned on. A Scotchman at the side of me said, "I don't know how the hell you kept so calm. I would have punched him, the little shit." I explained I wanted to be off and get home, so I did not want any further delays. Now, the rider of the first bike then decided to join his bike at this point and got a few jeers from the others waiting, but he just seemed to not give a toss. After 55 minutes of sitting there, the last remaining vehicles from the upper decks came by, at which point we were now told to disembark. But all the time I'd been sat on my bike, this Dutch guy kept eyeballing me. When I rode up to him, I had to stop. I told him he needed to work on his customer service skills and proceeded to explain how he should have dealt with it in a more respectful manner. He was not amused and became verbal and abusive again, coming right up to me, standing right next to me, shouting in my face. I gave him a few swear words of my own and became quite aggressive too. He said I should fuck off now, and the other man who stood next to him came between us and politely asked me to leave. I said I will, but would be making a formal complaint. And just as I was about to move away, the Dutchman shouted, "I'm going to get your fucking bike stripped down when you go through customs." I turned round, laughed at him, which he would clearly have seen due to my open face helmet, and told him to do his worst with a hand gesture depicting what I thought of him. I'm quite sure you can imagine what the signal was. I then rode off, half expecting it to happen. All passed through customs with no problem and headed the 50 miles back to Ferrybridge in our riding formation. Now some had decided not to stop and continue on their way, but some of us pulled in, seeing the tour to its conclusion. We took one last picture, at which point we said our goodbyes and went our separate ways back home after what had been an exceptionally grand tour of Switzerland. The last leg had seen us ride 432 miles from Buhl to Ferrybridge services in England, doing roughly 2,052 miles in total, in what I can only describe as a fantastic tour. The Grand Tour of Switzerland certainly lived up to its expectations of a highway to heaven.